Good morning. It's an abbreviated Rochester Today show. Minnesota Twins back in action this afternoon, a matinee game against Kansas City to close out that 3-game series. So Tom Ostrom's here. We're going to slip in a quick show, and I guess, Tom, we'll start with a mailbag.
Okay, satirical political cartoonist Branko. It shows a rugged-looking guy, a patriot with a flag on his hat, and he's burning a flag. You don't associate with patriots doing that, but he's burning a flag, and he says, "I love the old Minnesota flag," and he's burning the new one. And then Branko again on the case of Pope Francis. And Pope Francis, as we mentioned last time, did say conservatism in the church is a suicidal attitude. And Branko shows Jesus in the background saying, "Woe to those who call good evil." That's good. And then I'm going to take some time. I submitted my June column to you, and I'm going to take some time on that because there's a lot of interesting things.
And that'll show up if you want to read it, the column, go to krocnews.com or the News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM app Saturday morning. That's when it'll show up.
Thank you. And it's about how higher education with the demonstrations and the anti-Semitism has lowered the bar. And I mentioned Mike Rowe, the blue-collar labor advocate and host of TV shows. And he mentions how trade schools are booming and young students are going to them and to red state schools. And Monica Showalter, American thinker, says students are shunning elite universities because of all this and going to the conservative red states. The climate's better intellectually and weather-wise. And Mike McDaniel quoted a person advising Jewish students to head south, and some are. And the great historian Victor David Hanson, a widely published and a television pundit, he decried the campus, and he's a scholar and had been a professor at Ivy League schools, and he decried the campus anti-Semitism and students who fear no consequences, but they want to be free to have professional careers in our horrible country after they graduate. And he said he finds the students are generally, even those demonstrating, ignorant about geography, about history, about the Middle East, about Israel's achievements as a democrat nation. And he said those that do know about Israel's accomplishments in making the desert bloom are jealous. And then I have a story about a Cultural Revolution survivor from Mao's China in the 1960s. She moved to this country, and she sees that kind of attitude and violence on contemporary campuses, and it frightens her. So those stories about people taking on these leftists on university campuses, that's the mailbag.
That's interesting to bring up the Maoist comparison, because I think it is a fair comparison. It wouldn't take too much imagination to see one of these rallies escalate to the point that somebody be brought forward and beaten on stage as a lesson to others. Made an example of, because of their lack of loyalty to whatever message is being portrayed by the revolutionaries on campus as they take on the bourgeois. It is truly frightening, some of the scenes you see from some of these campuses. And then you go back to the late 1960s and what happened with Mao's revolution in China and the almost total destruction of that nation through that belief in Marxism and socialism is pretty scary.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Alpha News.
Do you want to take a break first? We better.
You are correct, Andrew. I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Okay.
Well, being with you here.
We'll do a quick break. Return in just a moment. We have some more of Rochester Today coming ahead before the Minnesota Twins broadcast begins at 11:30 on News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM. Good morning. We're back with Rochester Today, an abbreviated program because of Minnesota Twins baseball at 11:30. And we'll try to cover what we can with the time that we have. Tom, go ahead and start out with what you did try to start out with before the break.
Hey, Alpha News. Liz Collin, she's a Twin Cities journalist for years in some major outlets, and she now is with Alpha News doing some great investigative journalism. And she interviewed Barry Broad, and he testified in the Derek Chauvin trial, the George Floyd time. And he said he doesn't believe the officers convicted received a fair trial. He doesn't think they were guilty of anything wrong. He was a law officer for more than 30 years and an instructor. And he said the environment there had all jurors frightened because they saw the barbed wire and the police, and none of them wanted to support the officers because they knew when they got out from under the barbed wire and the fences, or the fences, I should say, not barbed wire, that they'd be at risk at home. And so, and he said, I am a defensive tactical trainer, a police officer. Chauvin did the right thing. He did what was in the police manuals. His knee was not on George Floyd's neck that long. And he was just, I think he said all of them have been railroaded, and I've been threatened. My life has been made hell because what I brought up, and they kind of dismissed it. Judge Cahill dismissed what I had to say, and the jurors are saying, and jurors did sympathize with the police officers, but they said, well, if I support them, I'm in danger. And he said, I know that. And he said, I was surprised how fast people got my cell phone number and home address and how quickly they harassed me. But he said he thought it's an outrage what happened, and Derek Chauvin in prison now being treated the way he is. So
in that case, though, I mean,
go ahead.
It's been prosecuted, and I think it's over. I think he may dream of appeals, but I don't think he's going to be granted an appeal, Chauvin. I don't see it happening. I think he'll have to serve out his sentence.
Yeah. Well, Barry Broad said politics ruled in the justice system in this case. I think it's ruling in the justice system with Trump, too, but that's another story. But we mentioned law enforcement people, and, the security officers in prisons and jails, too, face danger. And we've had incidents in the Olmsted County Jail, and Stillwater State Prison had a lockdown recently. This from the Associated Press. Correctional officers at the Minnesota prison sustained injuries when they were attacked by inmates, and they were assaulted a few days ago, and no weapons were used. Officers were treated for minor injuries, but the revolt was put down, and it's just the people who wear uniforms in any kind of law enforcement are quite vulnerable.
I think they're at a higher risk now than they have been for quite some time. The heartening message, though, from that story of what happened at Stillwater over the Memorial Day weekend, there were inmates who came to the rescue of the correctional officers. They were being attacked, and some of the other inmates intervened on behalf of the correctional officers.
Well, that is encouraging indeed, because not all the people who are arrested are violent or particularly nasty, and this, what you just said, is an example of that. Continuing in law enforcement, in Itasca, Minnesota, the county jail just painted over a display of the Ten Commandments that were on the wall. And the Ten Commandments were displayed, and people are saying inmates should be reading them and learning.
Right.
Because they got in trouble because they didn't pay attention to it. But a lot of fussing by people who think freedom of religion means excluding religion. That's not what Thomas Jefferson and other people had in mind. It was to keep government from controlling religion.
Exactly.
That separation of church and state. But some people misinterpreted it, and some people were intimidated by it, and they blanked out, painted over the Ten Commandments on the jailhouse wall.
Was that brought forward by a lawsuit? I never heard about this. Or was that just somebody within the county government decided that would be something they wish to have done?
Well, the religious texts were there, and Brett Skiles said that we were pressured to take that away because people were offended by it, and
it was too judgy.
The Madison, Wisconsin-based organization that pursued this claimed to have received complaints, and so they.
All right.
They went
so
after.
They were pressured from an outside organization. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then in these politically sensitive times, why that was enough to stimulate that reaction.
I'm old enough to remember where it was a very common sight to see the Ten Commandments either displayed, carved into stone, or through some elaborate display in most government buildings.
Yeah.
But those days are gone. Aren't they still at the U.S. Supreme Court in the marble, carved into marble? I believe they are.
You're correct. Those references are on the Supreme Court structures, carved in marble. It's funny, no one's ever tried to blank that out, Andy.
Well, our criminal justice system is based upon Judeo and Christian traditions. It's where the rule of law came from. Mm-hmm. All right. But you're right. That's been a point of contention now for multiple decades. We've got about 5 minutes left here, Tom.
I think people are anti-religion because even though religion is getting watered down and political pressure in modern times, the religion says no to things and don't for things. And people are offended by that judgmental attitude as they see it, and so they impose their judgmental attitude on the rest of us. Democrats are showing signs of border anxiety. They see the public opinion polls. This from Newsmax. They see public opinion polls siding with the border strengthening side, and Democrats are suffering in the polls over it. So is Biden. And so some Democrats are changing their tune, and while they dismiss the border crisis and blame Trump for it and everything, they see a political liability coming with these illegal immigrants and the cost to society and the crime. And Senate Majority Leader Democrat Chuck Schumer is even ramping up messaging to suggest we need more border security now. And Senate Democrats in tight races are pressuring the Biden administration to take action as these migrants come over the border. For example, Senator John Tester, Democrat, Montana, a vulnerable incumbent, confronted Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and said, look, I'm calling on you and the Biden administration to put soldiers on that border. Well, again, there's something called the Posse Comitatus law since the Civil War, which restricts military freedom to impose jurisdiction over civilians. That's one reason the Coast Guard's not in the Defense Department. It's military, but it also has law enforcement authority over civilians. But some people say get rid of that posse comitatus and get our troops on the border rather than sending them overseas to protect other people's borders. But Schumer can read the polls, and so can other Democrats, and now they're kind of mellowing out and saying, let's tighten that border. I don't know if that'll have any effect before the election, but on anybody.
I don't. Yeah, I think the public, if you're reading the polling numbers now, and that's the weird thing, things could change, whatever it may be. There's a general consensus of being fed up with this administration. And I think even among Democrats, there's frustration with this administration. And it's telling when the person who's going to be the nominee for the Republicans is on trial in New York, and his polling numbers are better than the incumbent. That's pretty weird.
You wonder. And speaking of that Florida judge, Elise Cannon, a Trump appointee, she's going after special counsel Jack Smith again, and he wanted to bar Trump from criticizing law enforcement in these episodes of what they've done or not done and what the FBI did at Mar-a-Lago, and he wants to bar Trump from speaking about it. He says it puts law officers in danger. And Judge Cannon told him, I deny your request. Your requests, as usual, are excessive, and if you keep this up, we're going to have sanctions on you.
On Smith?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Well, one part of that problem was the FBI evidently, through Merrick Garland, the DOJ secretary, was authorized to use deadly force against Trump.
Yes, that was twisted and weird, that whole episode. But I was hoping we'd talk about this. I forgot about it last week. I'm conflicted on this because I don't have enough information. Now, if it was somebody filling out a regular affidavit, which you usually go through in order to get the search warrant to conduct the operation, and it's check this box type situation, because you are deploying a SWAT team, whether or not I agree or disagree that that's necessary. I personally didn't think that was necessary. But if it's protocol in the use of a SWAT team in a law enforcement operation to check a box, then I'm going, okay. But then, on the other hand, I question the whole idea of deploying a SWAT team against a former president over what he was accused of doing at Mar-a-Lago, whether that was needed or should have even been considered in the first place. So there's my conflict.
And Judge Cannon was concerned about the overreach of that search, that the FBI went into the bedroom quarters of Trump's family, including his wife. They said there were dangerous instruments in the kitchen and in the gymnasium.
Knives, maybe?
Yep, and
like kitchen knives.
I think they were fishing, and I'd read one article that said they were fishing for documents Trump might have had that implicated Obama and Biden in classified document excesses, and so they were fishing. And Judge Cannon nailed Smith on that too. Said next time you'd be more specific about charges, but your charges are excessive.
Well, this still goes back to one fundamental problem with the case. If you're going to prosecute Trump, you really needed to prosecute Hillary Clinton, and they probably should be prosecuting the current president of the United States once he leaves office, if you're going to hold that standard. Now, I get the argument, oh, Biden cooperated. Well, he didn't cooperate until they found out he actually had the documents, and then he cooperated. Prior to that, he wasn't really cooperating. He didn't. All right. Unfortunately, we've got to run. We'll talk to you on Tuesday, Tom. You have a great weekend.
You too. Are you getting cynical, Andrew?
Getting? I think I got there a while ago, thanks to you. All right. You have a great weekend, Tom. We'll talk to you Tuesday. Twins baseball coming up in just a moment. At News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.